Welcome to Type C Tech Reviews. Today we're going to be doing a review of the KTC M27P20 Pro. If at any point during the video you want to check out this exact same monitor, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links, but let's talk about the M27P20 Pro. And there's a lot to talk about today. Okay, firstly, 27-inch screen size, has a 3840 by 2160 resolution, 4K, and this comes in at about 163 pixels per inch, which is essentially how crisp and clear this is actually going to appear to your eye, which is really good. That's more than you need. No visible pixelation, even with smaller text. That's great. Now, the special part about this monitor is it's a mini LED lit IPS panel with about 576 local dimming zones. Now, if you're familiar with the monitor market, the CoolerMaster Tempest GP27U is in a $900-ish price range. This is not. It's significantly less, and those use the exact same panel here. So my thinking when I bought this was this could potentially just make the GP27U, which honestly at this point is a little bit too expensive when compared to everything in the market, but this one isn't. Maybe this could just replace that for most people that are looking at the GP27U, and unfortunately that's just not the case. Now, this has a matte finish. It's a little bit thicker than I initially thought when unboxing the monitor, so you can notice some dirty screen effect in slower paced games like in the Sky. That's fine, not a big deal. For ports, this has one DisplayPort 1.4, two HDMI 2.0s, doesn't have any 2.1s like the GP27U does, but it still does have a KVM switch, a USB Type-C with 90 watts of charging, a 3.5mm audio jack, two USB Type-A downstreams, and a USB Type-B upstream, so that's all pretty solid. Refresh rate is the same here, 160 Hertz, FreeSync and G-Sync compatible, but the one thing is, even with the latest firmware, I was unable to get variable refresh rate with local dimming on. I was able to get HDR and variable refresh rate at the same time, but regardless of what I did, I was unable to get variable refresh rate and local dimming on at the same time. However, honestly, not too big of a deal because I wasn't really noticing screen tearing with variable refresh rate off, so that's a good thing. That didn't really bug me too much. Now, brightness is where unfortunately this falls short of what I expected. Now again, the GP27U currently is selling for $924.08, so the attraction is you're getting the same panel for significantly less money. However, spoiler alert, this is nowhere as good as the GP27U. Nowhere as good. And almost all of this has to do with panel tuning. While a lot of us kind of complained about the GP27U in terms of like updates and stuff, at least CoolerMaster is pumping out firmware updates for the GP27U. This KTC is tuned way worse than that panel ever was, and they're not doing anything about it. So really, it's a great actual panel, it's just tuned so poorly, and when you're doing mini LED lit, it has to be really, really refined. Okay, but what does that mean? Let's talk about the actual specifics. While this panel still gets very bright overall, like the GP27U got wildly bright, when using local dimming, the overall picture gets significantly dimmer, which is literally the opposite of the CoolerMasters. When you turn local dimming on, the picture got way brighter. In some instances, it got like almost twice as bright. And for some reason on this panel, it gets overall dimmer. So the overall contrast between the brightest area of the screen and the darkest area of the screen, while I'm sure the darks are probably still about the same, the bright isn't. So the dynamic range between that is just not there, and it doesn't give the overall beauty like the Tempests, both of them, the 1440p and the 4K variant, which is the GP27U and the GP27Q. Both of those are significantly better than this. Now, there's a few different local dimming modes. There's off, which is off. Then there's auto, which doesn't really seem to do that much local dimming. Then there's standard, which is what I left it in most of the time, which is the brightest version of the local dimming. And then there's high. High makes everything even darker, really to a point where it's like, what am I getting for being a mini LED lit IPS panel? It doesn't make sense. High just doesn't work, basically. But what about HDR? Well, the color tuning is wildly inaccurate in HDR. It's also undersaturated to the point that I much more prefer using this monitor in SDR, which again is not how you want to use this monitor. You're buying this monitor to use it in HDR. That is the point of this monitor. And HDR just looked trash, and there's no settings in the OSD. So literally, unless you're gonna calibrate your monitor, which again, you probably don't have the money to have a calibration tool, otherwise you'd get the GP27U, it just doesn't make sense. Now for the colors, while this does have a wide color gamut, accuracy here out of the box and SDR is also not great. And especially a problem is when you go into the local dimming and turn that on, it doesn't just change it to local dimming, it actually changes the white balance pretty substantially, which is honestly just extremely annoying, to be frank. So there's a lot of just issues because there's so much complexity with this panel, and obviously KTC probably doesn't have a lot of professionals that are tuning these monitors, and that reflects on the price point. It's not really something I'm gonna recommend. Now, while the contrast ratio here is significantly better than an IPS panel that doesn't have many LEDs, or a VA panel for that matter, you don't get that huge difference between the bright brights and the darker blacks, not like you got with the CoolerMaster, which honestly, yes, that monitor still has some issues. I was happy to live with those issues. I loved that monitor. I know some people didn't, but I thought especially the GP27Q, the 1440p variant, that was the one that was really at a price point that was like, wow, you're getting a really, really awesome HDR experience for not really that much money, especially at a time when there wasn't really any OLEDs then. Now, ghosting here is dang good. There's no real problems with the ghosting here, especially if you're hitting 160 hertz. The ghosting is almost crystal clear. It is damn good. However, let's talk about price and value. And I think you already know what I'm gonna say, but this is currently priced on Amazon, links below, at $599.99. Now, if this was to perform like the GP27U, this would be like a go buy it right now kind of situation. It would be awesome. But personally, I would not buy this monitor for myself at all. There's too many other monitors that are better. Not that this is inherently a bad monitor, I just don't think it performs well enough for its price tag, especially when OLEDs exist. I'd honestly go from having 4K and go to the GP27Q, which is 1440p, but the same specs as the 4K GP27U, the CoolerMaster Tempest, but it's just 1440p, and that's $50 cheaper than this monitor. However, if you're like, well, I still want 4K, but I want those deep blacks, well, don't spend $900 on the GP27U anymore. It's not a good value because OLEDs exist. Like the Alienware AW3225QF, that's a 4K 32-inch panel, and it is the greatest monitor that I have ever reviewed. I'm in love with that monitor, and I'm tough on OLEDs. That one comes in at about $1,200, and now I know what you're talking about. That's double what we just talked about, but if you're going from this and then considering the GP27U, it's only $300 more, but let's say you're okay with 1440p. The 27-inch 1440p OLED that's 360 hertz, the Alienware, which just came out, that one is currently at a freaking steal of like $783. Now, keep in mind, that's only $183 more than this monitor, and it's an OLED, and it's 360 hertz. And yes, while it's 1440p, it is a significantly better viewing experience, visually, no ghosting. At this point in time, it is like God tier OLED technology. Yeah, I definitely recommend all of those other choices over this monitor. Not that it's a bad monitor. To each their own. But if you want to check out this monitor or any of the other ones that I talked about, like the GP27Q, the Alienware 3225QF, or the 27-inch 1440p variant, I'm going to link all of those below as well as my review of the 27-inch OLED. That is right here. Go check that one out. Great monitor. Now, one last thing that I'll leave you with is some people in Europe were able to take their European units and update them with the firmware from the GP27U. Through my research, I found that a few people bricked them, so your monitor's pretty much dead, with a possible chance of reverting back to the original firmware. But if you could do that, this would be an awesome panel for a really cheap price. But again, you're taking a massive risk while doing that. So yeah. All right, this is Type C Tech Reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next video.